waiting. We'd prefer you have your choice. Coffee. Judy? Wow, the whole Ashka is here.
My name is Greg Warhola, and I am the chairman of SOPA. I'm also the executive director for China Daily, based here in Hong Kong. SOPA is the Society of Publishers in Asia, founded in 1982. We are a not-for-profit organization now in our 33rd year. SOPA stands for freedom of press, stands for excellence in journalism, stands for best practices in publishing business, and we celebrate excellence in journalism, and we believe in the industry as a whole, and the idea of collecting publishers and advertisers and agencies and associated groups to come together for purposes like this, where we share information and help to meet each other, helps makes us stronger overall here in Asia. So I thank you all for coming this morning for this very interesting discussion on the commercial value of press freedom. Before we get to that, I'd like to point out that SOPA has 39 member organizations, and 2 new organizations that joined this year are with us. Tracy and Richard of the Barons, I'd like to welcome you. And also, and from Nikkei, Mr. Shimizu is here. Welcome. I'd also like to take a moment just to ask those members of the SOPA board who are here with us, please just stand up. This can't be done without the selfless volunteers. And I know I have to make special thanks to Lillian and to Bloomberg, without which this wouldn't be possible. Lillian's been running around all morning taking care of a lot of things behind the scenes to make this possible. And that's really what SOPA is about. It's about the opportunity for people that are in the industry to volunteer their time, their energies, and their ideas and their creativity to come together and help build up this organization. As I mentioned, SOPA celebrates editorial excellence. And this year we're celebrating the 17th annual SOPA Awards dinner. It's a gala dinner that we held on June 10th. Please mark your calendars, June 10th at the Hong Kong Convention Center. It's an evening event, and the editorial committee of SOPA will recognize hundreds of submissions, the best editorial content from local and regional publications that is submitted. As in the past, Invest Hong Kong is serving as our platinum sponsor. I'm very excited to announce that this year Google is joining us as a SOPA sponsor, and K11 is back as a supporting sponsor. There's still opportunities for more sponsorship, and we really look to you to help support the industry and help support SOPA, and we hope that you'll be able to turn out. If not as a sponsor, please come join us that evening. Buy a table, buy a couple of tickets, and help cheer on the winners. Now, to the event at hand, the commercial value of press freedom. A long time ago, I was working for a rep firm in the U.S., and one of my colleagues is a former editor of a Midwestern paper in Kansas. And he told me, he surprised me, he said, oh, we used to do all kinds of stuff to drum up circulation cells. I really like, what? Oh, I said, you go up to the mayor, he said, Mr. Mayor, when did you stop beating your wife? And it didn't the mayor would say, well, I've never beaten my wife. And he said the next day the headline would read, Mayor denies beating his wife. Circulation cells. More closer to home. When I first came to Hong Kong in 1990, I worked for Dow Jones, and we had 2 publications that had been gazetted by the Singapore government because the government was unfavorably disposed to content that had been written. In the Asian Wall Street Journal, the Far Eastern Economic Review, And it was the government leader who had said, it is our intent to punish Dow Jones financially for the exercise that it's taking with its freedoms. And that's when I first started hearing about self-censorship. In 1992, some of you may recall that President George Bush became violently ill in Tokyo, and at a state dinner, he happened to throw up on Prime Minister Miyazawa. And the president passed out, and the media, especially the American media, was shielded from what was going on. And when the president left the State House, blankets had been erected to shield the president, the sick, feeble president, from photographers. And there was a bit of an outcry over that. In the West, people were saying we were prohibited from doing, from our freedom of the press rights. And I had a discussion in 1992 with the Tokyo director of my organization, and we talked about the difference in philosophies. And we said, why would an organization want to publish something that's going to embarrass its country, embarrass its people, embarrass its leaders? What is the value in doing something like that? He said, he put forward that the American idea of free press means you can do whatever you want, must be done with responsibility. And then we had Charlie Hebdo, the attack in Paris. It shocked the world, and there were some people who said, well, you know, being able to do whatever you want doesn't mean you should do whatever you can, and you must be respectful of the differences. And there is the question of what is the limit, and what difference does it make ultimately to the publisher. Publishers supported in solidarity the quote right to offend. Publishers warned of provoking an audience. But does having a relatively free or unfree press matter to publishers, really, commercially? Does pushing the boundaries of free speech help or hinder business? Here to discuss whether freedom of the press is or should be a serious consideration for advertisers in Asia is our august panel, which I'd like to introduce right now. I guess in no particular order. So with Zohar Abdul Karim. Zohar, for the past 7 years, has been the Asia editor for Time International, overseeing Time's Asia edition. Where's Zohar?
Here.
You want to talk? For 6 years, senior editor at Time Asia, a position he assumed in 2002, where he shaped all aspects of Time's coverage of Asia. Before joining Time Asia, Zohar was the managing editor of Asia Week and the editor of Singapore-owned Asian Business. Over the course of the career, Zohar has been a foreign correspondent based in Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore, with reporting assignments in the Philippines, India, Brunei, and Hong Kong. Zohar is an ethnic Indian, born and raised in Hong Kong. He is a British national. And he's a graduate of the University of Wisconsin in Madison in the USA. So welcome, Zohar. Next, I'd like to introduce Angela Mackay. Angela is the managing director of the Financial Times Asia Pacific, based here in Hong Kong and a member of the FT's global board. Angela focuses on developing business for the FT's operations in the region. Angela is also a member of the Pearson Asia Pacific ABC Committee, and she served on the boards of the and she serves on the board of the Hong Kong International Literary Festival. So welcome, Angela. So we have the media editorial side, we have the media business side, and we also have the client side. I'm happy to introduce Serafina Wong, head of Asia Pacific, UBS UBS Communications and Branding. Serafina, please welcome. Serafina is the Global Advertising Head of Asia Pacific Communications and Branding for UBS AG. She has an extensive career across the marketing, media, and advertising fields. She first started at Estee Lauder in 1986 on the marketing side. She went on to expand her knowledge of branding and advertising fields by working in both the agency and media sides at Ogilvy & Mather and Dow Jones Wall Street Journal Asia, where I had the privilege of working with Serafina for a little while when I was there as well. She joined Philip Morris Asia in 1993 and was instrumental in driving the marketing business from Marlboro. In 2002, she was appointed head of brand management for Asia Pacific at UBS. Serafina has held various positions at UBS, covering branding and advertising from the corporate center, as well as wealth management marketing, and she's active in the Marketing Society Asia. So that is our panel, but no panel is complete without a moderator. And so I'm very happy to welcome Robin Hicks. Robin is editor of Umbrella Asia. He's based in Singapore. After graduating from the University of Bristol in the UK, he moved to Asia in 2006 to join Cambridge Asia as a Southeast Asia editor. He later took on the role of editor of Government Technology Magazine at FutureGov. 2 years later, he moved to Australia to join Umbrella as deputy editor, and during his 2 years in Australia, he moved up to managing editor, then to development editor. 6 years later, he was given the opportunity to move back to the region that is closest to his heart, Asia, to launch the Asian edition of Umbrella. Oh, Robin's right there. Okay, very good. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Robin.
Thank you. Thank you. So thanks everyone for coming. It's a topic that's close to my heart, and I think that the event, the news event that really brought it into focus, as Ray mentioned, was Charlie Hebdo attacks in Paris. And that's the first question I'd like to put to the panel. Really, also we've got an advertiser, also Angela's running the media side of this, and on the editorial side we've got Zoe here. And my first question is the impact. I think it was a genuine global news event, and I wanted to know about the sort of impact that the Charlie Hebdo attacks had on your organisation. And so here, I'll put that question to you first. So Charlie Hebdo, what were the sort of conversations that happened at the time after that event, particularly in light of press freedom?
Hello? Our own coverage of the Charlie Hebdo story was pretty straight. It happened on Wednesday, which is press day for Time. So that very first issue, we just had a couple of pages in the magazine, even as there was continuing coverage for Time.com online, which obviously is a 24/7 operation. I went through the story recently. Obviously, it's not my theater. It was my theater's arena's Asian. And it was a pretty straight story, pretty much news-oriented. No images of the offending cartoons. The following, we did a cover story pegged to the Charlie Hebdo killings. The cover story was very much, as you would expect from Time, looking ahead, and it was an examination of the place of the Muslim immigrant in Europe. So how they were, their attitude towards what happened, how they thought it would affect them, and whether there would be a change in attitudes from governments and wider communities in Europe towards their Muslim populations. So it's pretty, there was really no investigation or delving into the ethics or the responsibility or the freedom of the press versus the responsibility issue in terms of Charlie Hebdo. Now, were there discussions on this in the office in New York and London, which would have handled those stories? I don't know. Did we discuss in Hong Kong? Yes, we did. Simply because we're interested in it. Last week, I gave a talk to a think tank. It was a closed-door session, and it was a group of business executives. And it was to do with the place of the press in society. And the Charlie Hebdo thing came up. So I put up on, by the title of the talk was One Story, Many Narratives. When I started out in journalism, I was told that there's always 2 points of view that you should get across in your stories for balance. Well, that's wrong. They're not 2 points of views. There are many points of views. And it's not just alternative points of views. What we're seeing now, even as the world is coming together through technology. So you have a teenager in New York City, not very different in his or her interest to a teenager in Riyadh, to a teenager in Cairo. Okay, even as you have that, you actually have a fragmentation, a deglobalization, if you like. And the Charlie Hebdo thing really showed this, because it's not just different points of view. It's actually the prism, the cultural prism through which people look at that is completely different. So obviously you have freedom of the press thing, and you have Muslims in particular who are deeply, deeply offended. So at my talk, when we got to the Charlie Hebdo thing, one of my colleagues put up all the cartoons on the screen in the back. And I didn't notice it, but my colleagues did. One member of the audience, he walked quietly out. And apparently was a banker, Asian and Muslim. Okay? And he walked out, and from time to time, I was told later, he would peek in to see if the visuals had been taken away. And when he saw that they weren't, he walked out again. We found out later on. Clearly, banker, big bank in operating in this part of the world, clearly he was offended by this. Later on, he apparently apologized to the organizer for walking away. Frankly, I don't think he's got anything to apologize for. So I think this shows, just want to tell you, this shows the complexity that there is no single truth to a story. There are many truths, many narratives.
So Angela, over to you. I'm interested in the sort of conversations that were had at the FT as MD and publishers. You were aware of the conversations that were happening editorially, as well as do you have any concerned advertisers about the coverage of Charlie Hebdo? Again, as Sophia mentioned, whether to publish those cartoons or whether not to.
Before this panel, I checked with the London office, because obviously that story is run out of our London Editorial Centre, and that's our headquarters. And also checked with advertising, the head of advertising there, to see if there was any repercussions from our decision to publish the offending cover online. We didn't end up publishing it in the newspaper, but we published it online. And apparently we had not one query from any advertiser. So there was no one that was upset about the fact that we did run that cover. Now the conversations in editorial, obviously, that we have a great line between church and state at the FT. I still make a phone call to find out. There was some concern about running the cover. There was a debate about it, and obviously at the end of the debate, a decision was made that this was a story. It's a valid story, and we must cover that story. Even though for us, as the FT, we're not that obsessed with daily news coverage. For us, it's more about interpretation of what's going on in the news, in business news, in political, geopolitics, or corporate news. So there's not a great imperative for us to be shocking or try to shock, but our imperative is to cover the news and to cover it honestly. And as far as we're concerned, the single biggest asset the FT has, the FT group has, and I might speak for our sister publication, The Economist, is the validity and the strength and the integrity of our content. So if you screw that up, then I think we screw up the rest of the business. So that has got to be a rock solid platform.
Let's use Seraphine, obviously, an advertiser, influential advertiser. Were there conversations going on within UBS about the sorts of publications that you put the advertising in, given that some would be covering the story in a different way? I guess the secondary question is, where did UBS's brand values align with a publication in terms of press briefing?
I'll talk about the first one first. I very much in line with what Angela just said, the integrity and quality of the report of this writer. Not so much on sort of advertisers' point of view, just as a reader and a community point of view. I think if all the more qualified the more prestigious publications are not doing that, then who else is going to do that? In the bigger picture, being an advertiser in this particular conversation is relatively unimportant, you see. Okay? I mean, the simple logic, I'm entirely simplifying the process here. The bad of the week, being authentic, truth, and unbiased, and all those good things, will always invite and attain the quality readers. Like, so if you want to go for Apple Daily, they sell a lot of ads too, but we're not there. That's an extreme example. So the problem is, it's not about just selling papers or having authorship online. There are many tricks to do that. It's always going back to the quality of the editorial and the truth, the authenticity, and the ability to provoke thoughts, but not imposing a tinted point of view, almost like, to your point made earlier, there's one story but many narratives. To me, as a reader and an advertiser, so happen, it is always to put forward a thought set for people's opinions and point of view, whether it is business news, corporate news, or economics or political in this particular sense. Now, from an advertiser's point of view, because we're a bank, and so that side is the bank first, right? Just say any brands, the FMCG service or products. Again, what is the point of leaning towards quality and bias point of view? Is about sort of addressing something towards your audience. So I thought of it, what is it to do with UBS? As a business, there's a lot of similarity in Deborah and that. Thought leadership, and I think many of us, one way or the other, for the sake of the company, and actually promote thought leadership quite a lot. You also have advisory, although not financial advisory, you actually put in suggestions to your customers through your communications. And this is why, because of this quality, you go for the quality of the publishers. Okay? If you don't care, you just want to put out a message, you certainly can go to local newspapers or some sensational news because they will have your ownership. The similarities that for UBS, we truly believe in research-backed advisory as a product proposition. Our people are expected to behave in a certain way. So authenticity, integrity, and the ability to do your best for clients, analyzing situations and opportunities, and therefore helping them to make the right choice. Now, in life, it's all about choices, right? When you believe in certain things by reading up, researching, studying, examining. The more you read, the more you know the truth. So going back to the subject matter, and that's also UBS and I think publications has the responsibility to provide all those views, truth, evidence, and the process involves a lot of disclosure and discovery, hard work, going into battlefields and really risking maybe jurisdictions as well, right? To actually disclose something that, okay, we have to know, but we want more advice. And I have a lot of respect for that. In that process, it actually caused tragedies, like the Paris office. I'm very daring to say that maybe it is inevitable, but I'm glad if people keep, going with that, and knowing that in a wrong way, some people may be punished wrongly.
Point of view. Don't actually so here on again Charlie Hebdo, what I think it brought into focus is the editorial line that publications take and how far you can push the freedom to affect. Okay. And I just wanted to know where, from your personal perspective, that line is, and did Charlie Hebdo bring into sharper focus where that line is for you personally, and also the time measure?
I think let me just talk generally first. I think how a media outfit looks at freedom and what it wants to publish and post and what it does not. It depends, I think, on certain things. What kind of media operation it is, and what its mission is, what its owner is like, and what are the values of the proprietor. What is the proprietor's ideology, whether it's a him or her or an it. And the third thing, I think the third factor is the financial health of that media outfit. And the fourth factor is, what is the covenant that that media organization has with its readers? Because at an operation like Time, like the FT, we have certain values that we've developed over 90 years of history, okay? What Time is at, the values that Time has now have evolved hopefully to a point where, yes, integrity, trust, fairness, all the things, all the things that we admire about quality journalism, that we try to exercise that daily and weekly and yearly. But that's not the case with all media operations. There are media operations that now, particularly with the fragmentation of media, the disruption of the industry, that you have media operations that actually will want to give the readers what they want. I mean, it's not a case anymore now that editors can tell the readers, okay, the Danish Prime Minister is meeting the Swedish Foreign Minister, and you know what? You really need to know about this meeting. Well, you know what? You don't. Okay, that's what a lot of readers are saying. So we have a situation where the readers are dictating a lot more to the operation. That is a huge change. Editors have to be much more, cannot sit in their offices and talk among themselves and say, this is what we think you should know to be informed. There's been a lot of engagement with the reader. Financial health, I mean, let's be frank. There are media all over the world that will adapt their coverage depending on advertiser or funding and so on and so forth. And of course, none of us are objective. I never use the word objectivity in my meetings because it's false, because it doesn't exist. Okay, so I think that's the thing that we got to look at that there's a fragmentation, disruption in the industry, and so you have a lot more players. The FT and Time obviously are big players, but you have a lot more in the mix, and more now the world turns to these seemingly smaller, more niche, but extremely influential because of technology, because of social media. Personally, did you ask me personally? Do I really want to answer that? I'm going to answer it through Tim Parks. Tim Parks is a British novelist, and he wrote an essay for the New York Review of Books in the wake of Charlie Hebdo called Limits of Satire. And what I can't say it better than him, so I'm just going to quote him. And basically said that satire, the purpose of satire is to spark positive change. So he thought that the Charlie Hebdo cartoons failed as satire. Now I understand, I'm not French, but I understand that French have a tradition of satire over the centuries, to be witty, to be sharp, to be provocative. That's very important in French culture. But he said it failed because the satire that Charlie Hebdo was doing in terms of these cartoons, whether it was about Islam or the Catholic Church or about politicians in France, but the ones about Islam failed for two reasons. One, they did not create positive change. If anything, they reinforced the prejudices and the divisions between the sides, okay, on both sides. And the other thing that did not accomplish, I forgot that point, but, and why this was the case is because there is no, for satire to work, it has to appeal to a single cultural language. And in this case, you didn't have a single cultural language. So he quoted from Jonathan Swift in the 18th century, when people in Ireland were starving under Protestant rule. So Jonathan Swift wrote a satirical piece, and he said, you know what? People are starving. Why don't we do this? Why don't we take the babies and kill them and roast them and grill them and fricassee them, and then we'll also eat. And it was easily recognizable, even in the mid-1700s, that this was satire, that he wasn't really, suggesting we do this, because we all, according to Tim Parks, we all have this cultural language, single cultural language, that we should not be doing that to babies. Okay, wherever you are in the world, you have that. Okay, but that's not the case of Charlie Hebdo. So according to him, it actually failed. Personally, I feel the cartoons are not very sophisticated. I know it is a certain tradition, but when I look at them, they're simplistic. They're very elemental. There's no nuance. But that is the purpose. I want to say one more thing. The other thing is this, no matter how offended you are, and this is where the freedom aspect comes in, basically, the people who publish those cartoons and are behind them are not killing anybody physically. They're not hurting anybody in a physical sense. I know people can be deeply offended. So you know how you fight back? Well, you can fight back through legal means, political means, social means, or you can make your argument, your better argument. You fight an idea that you don't like with another idea. You know what? You don't kill randomly.
So up to you, Angela. See, your background's in journalism. So presumably there was a line for you as to what you crossed and what you could write and what you couldn't. Presumably that line changed when you obviously promoted now on commercial starts straddling both sides. So where is the line for you personally, and how is that line affected by Charlie Hebdo?
My personal line really is different to my professional line because I allow all our editors to decide where they want to draw it. So if what they want to do, we will support because it's a collegiate organisation. And if one of them is going to run amok and go mad, I'm sure the other one, the rest of them will put them in line. So I'm not particularly worried that, about their editorial choices at all. I mean, I trust them, and that's what I'm there for. I'm there to support them and to build a business around what they write and how they perceive the world. So that's my professional line. My personal line is, and I'm quite glad you said that because I don't get it. I mean, I haven't really got the humour in the Charlie Hebdo. It's a bit like Private Eye. Sometimes I have a big belly laugh, and the other times I just don't get it. So for me, it's been always traditionally been a very small audience for this magazine, which has swelled to be a massive audience as a result of those tragic deaths. But I think that they should be able to express their ideas. They're not promoting violence. They're not standing there with a pitchfork with the babies on it and sort of saying, buy them at the carton shop. They're not promoting a violent methodology. They're not trying to stoke cultural and racial divisions. They're trying to highlight them or identify them. So I think that fighting ideas with ideas is the way to go. But then, of course, we haven't been politicised the way a lot of the people who are extremists in that organisation, the way that they have been trained. Just looking at the outflow of very young people from the UK, I mean, I was in London twice so far this year, and there's this huge roiling in the press, both the popular press and the quality press, about why these teenagers feel that to find purpose in their life, they need to throw themselves into this extraordinary danger. And there's no real answer about that. But it does throw up this whole idea about people searching for something that provides them with more meaning. And obviously social media is not giving them meaning, but it's giving them the information to go out and try something new and something exciting and something that I suppose they don't realise is ultimately fatal for many of them, for some of them.
Okay. So if we know to you on the, again that line, but perhaps from your perspective personally and as an advertiser, where do you think UBS perhaps would feel uncomfortable in an editorial environment because you felt that the publication had pushed it a little too far? Where's the line where you feel uncomfortable that the UPS brand is associated with an editorial stance?
We don't. There's, like Angela said, I think we've got to respect and allow the editorial freedom to flow. That defines quality versus the rest of it. No. The moment you sort of examine the paper or the point of view of the paper, but the choice is very easy. You just pull yes, right? An agency can do it in 2 days. But that's not the point. It's like if you go to a doctor and you don't trust the doctor's advice and don't know, but you get more ill, right? And it's about consistency. Decisions from an advertiser's point of view is not based on one piece of news. It's generally, do you believe in that step? the views generally put out by publications. Now, obviously, that said, being in finance and banking, and during the crisis moments, we know that the FT has published things that is, from that point of view, is against banks, but it doesn't stop us from liking the publications. It's to work with them. Except it would be very foolish to put up an ads to say that, we're number one. Then the advertising disappeared for that reason, that we don't want to be foolish. But it doesn't mean that we don't value the editorial independence of that people. So I think the decision from the advertiser's point of view is never about what they say or from the point of view of the editors putting things out. There's always has to be independent. Whether an ad appears on a certain day is a very different decision. Whether there are actually putting the message out actually hurts the brand. Oftentimes, the brand is a good brand cannot be hurt just because of the association with a certain title or topic. So it's about sort of consistency in the longer term view. And I have a lot of respect for the church and state. I personally, those who work with me would probably believe that I don't really believe in sort of putting an ad in an environment that not old and it seems like a native, that sort of thing. An ad is a commercial message. It is there because the audience likes to read the newspaper or the website, following the news, and so happen to be there. That's all it is.
You mentioned church and state, particularly with the GFC, the Global Financial Crisis onwards. Revenues have been on display for publications across the world, which I guess draws into the question, how are publications able to hold on to that editorial integrity with greater pressures? I mean, there's a story in the UK newspaper, The Telegraph, and there was an expose about the stories to HSBC as a massive advertiser. It transpired that the newspaper buried those stories to protect its commercial interests. So I guess that that's the commercial reality. And I suppose so. My question is, how is Time, under increasing commercial pressure, able to hold on to that editorial integrity and keep that church and state solid?
Yeah, I was going to bring up the Telegraph example. Peter Olborn, their chief political commentator, wrote a piece about what led to his leaving the Telegraph. The Telegraph came back and defended itself and said that actually they had not come under pressure from HSBC, a major advertiser, to pull its punches on stories, on negative stories about HSBC. I want to come back to a point I made earlier. I think it helps with Time and with the wider company. Time is only one of 20-odd titles in the company. It helps that we have scale. It helps that we have heft. It helps that we have a tradition of journalism that people know about. Our main business is to cover current affairs. It's not just politics in all its forms, and we have a reputation that we do it with integrity. We do it fairly. I'm not saying that we execute on that 100% all the time, but I can tell you that when we go into meetings or we approach a story, that's exactly the way we look at it. We've had a lot of time to test ourselves. At this same talk that I gave last week, we were also talking about Hong Kong Occupy coverage. International media flooded in. All the top wall photographers came in looking for a fight. They didn't find it. But that first week, I put actually it was the international cover. My cover story was the Umbrella Revolution. So we put that up. Also, there was a lot of debate about whether it was accurate. Was it a revolution? Was it not a revolution? Revolution is basically agitation for change. Now, 3 months out there, just outside here, is not agitation for change. I don't know what a revolution is. Okay. Was the photograph fake? because it was so perfect. There was a man facing the camera, holding up two umbrellas, swirling, cloud of tear gas, and Jimmy Lai at the back. We didn't even know that. Well, it wasn't a time photograph, it was a Agence France-Presse photograph. And it was spontaneous, I was asked all these questions, and I was asked whether I wanted to do it to sell copies. Because, the Time cover is perhaps the best real estate in journalism. Other people have more resources, other people do more coverage. But once you put it on the cover, it's the cover. And none of this stuff, I said, went through my mind. My only thought seriously was, are we doing right by the story? The cover line was the Umbrella Revolution, and then something like Hong Kong's fight for freedom is a challenge to China. Is that true? It's all true. We didn't create this situation. But some of the questions that I was getting was, there was sort of this sense that I was getting that, you sensationalized it, or the revolution is gone now, 6 months later. Well, yeah, but at that time, was it the right story at the right time? Was it accurate? I still believe so, 6 months later. And no, we didn't know it was Jimmy Lai until Apple did the story and said, we think it's Jimmy Lai at the back. Someone was pouring water into his eyes because he'd been affected by the tear gas. So I think, but however, we as journalists, we as editors, and even the big brands, but it's not so much an issue for big brands, we don't have a monopoly on morality. There are good doctors, there are bad doctors. There are good journalists, there are bad journalists. There are good editors, there are bad editors. There are good publishers, there are bad publishers, okay? It's just like any other industry. And the thing is that I'm glad to hear Serafina, defend the advertiser and that the advertiser does migrate to quality. But we know that it is the case with certain companies, and certainly the kind of company that she belongs to. But we also know that advertisers pull advertising. They don't like the ideology. We all know about Apple Dailies. What do you think of Apple Dailies editorial coverage? Well, we do know that there are certain companies in Hong Kong and in China that will not be on the mainland, sorry, not China, they are in China, that will not advertise in Apple Daily. Apple Daily is not sold in Park and Shop, obviously, because of who Park and Shop belongs to. So these are the realities. I've been in the business 35 years, and frankly, not hardly a day goes by where I come across a situation that is, new and challenging. I have to draw back on all those 35 years and go, well, what am I going to do? And sometimes you get it right more times than you get it wrong, then you're doing okay. We also need a lot of love.
Okay, Angela, going back to the visual question. Church and state, former journalist, now MD and publisher. How do you, under increasing commercial pressures, manage church and state to ensure that the editorial retains its integrity, but also advertisers are?
Well, fortunately, most of our advertisers are the kind of people that know what they're going to get when they invest in the FT, online or in print. So we don't apologise for our content, and we expect people to accept the environment that they wish to share with us. They wish to share their information in our environment. So I think it's a bit like that the buyer beware, that nice old label makes them there. And the church and state thing, when I moved over from editorial, a lot of people said, oh my God, you've gone to the dark side. But frankly, I felt like I'd come into the light, because for the first time I understood the business around the thing that I did. And that's when I truly appreciated the wonderful convent that I used to live in editorial, because I was shielded from the vagaries, the attacks, the slings and arrows, the threats to pull ads. I was left in a pure-ish environment to get on with my job and to do it to the best of my ability, and to then compete with other journalists in my organisation to get that content in. So it was a charmed and charming existence in many ways. So to come out and then be exposed to the finances was a shock, frankly. And it took me a year to ask anyone for money. I'd go to meetings with my commercial colleagues and I go, you've got to ask them for money. Stop interviewing them, ask them for money. So it was I was a shocking commercial director for the first year. We didn't do well. But you know, get the hang of it, particularly when you have a thing called a bonus, because in Victoria you don't get bonuses, and then suddenly you get this like thing that comes every year out of the blue, which is terrific. So yeah, you kind of get the hang of it and you get into it. But just one thing you said, you didn't put that cover there to sell copies. What's wrong with having a cover that sells more copies? I mean, that's great. That's serendipity. That's really good luck.
I was hoping you'd see that.
Okay, fine. So, yeah, I think church and state works very well together, and increasingly journalists are influenced by the number of clicks, I think, or news editors are influenced by the number of clicks. Now, I'm not saying that because our Gothic architecture writer only got 10 clicks, it means we're going to get rid of our Gothic architecture column. It wouldn't be the same without it. But there is a sense that if someone's getting 1 million clicks, that you might want to invest a bit more time in the topic or the subject matter around that. So that sense that we're not going to sort of, we are interested in what our readers are looking at. Of course, I mean, probably up until about 15 years ago, the FT sort of ignored the idea that there were actual consumers of what we did. We were all sort of in an ivory tower, just sort of dispensing information. So now we're really trying to engage with our audience, really trying to understand them. And if they want to read more about the new international bank that China is trying to set up in Asia Pacific, that's in competition to the ADB or the World Bank, then yeah, we're going to give them some more information on that. So we are allowing the data that we can gather from our website, for example, to influence a bit more of where we're putting our direction. But it doesn't necessarily mean that if your esoteric column doesn't get that much traction, doesn't mean we're going to get rid of it, because that's part of the delight and the surprise, I think, of publications like the FT, that there are Gothic elements to it.
So Serafina, as a running marketing for UBS, a global brand, influential financial services company, what sort of relationship do you have with the publications you appear in? And frankly, are there instances where you feel, as a big advertiser, you should perhaps have more or favourable editorial coverage? How independent do you expect a publication to be of its advertisers?
Expectation is a big word. I'd like to spend a minute to talk about good advertisers versus the rest of it. Good advertisers is not those with money. I think like this. Now, when I do branding and advertising, this is a decision rests with the action of buying, not or the recommendation to buy the ads. I think we work in a bigger world of communications and marketing and branding and advertising as one umbrella. So I work with internal journalists, if you think of it that way. Okay? My colleagues are including people from the journalistic background who understand how these things work. And they have an independent point of view about what to avoid, what to influence, and how to work with editors. That their sort of church and state is separate. On the in-house, we work with them to understand the climate and what is the message to be tailored. So my extreme example is that if the entire industry category is being punished or written in a correct way, but not helping us kind of way, then the ad is not that appealing because it's nothing to say. It doesn't mean that we are actually against publications or even having some price, just that. When I say bad advertisers are not those with money, is because you don't really want to work with them if they're operating that way. Because you're going to have a perpetual misunderstood debate about a church and state. Right? In their mind, it's already something else. So it's just like as bad as going to a doctor and ask for something that he would not prescribe for you and you insist, and that conversation would not go very far. good doctors will say, I'm sorry, you've got to go somewhere else. And then the good, the bad patient will say, but I pay you money, you've got to give me that pill now. It's just not going anywhere, right? And then before you know that, this particular practicing license of this doctor should really be taken away if he, and so on and so forth. So I think good advertisers are those who would listen and understand and really understand what is going on in the industry. The moment you actually put pressure, if anybody can put pressure by saying, oh, your newspaper cannot be in my shop because, or you've got to stop writing these things because I'm going to pull my ads in the next 3 years, then okay, commercially you may feel a bit of, should I not? But really should not even go there on both sides. Okay? And that is particularly important, the topic is about freedom. Okay? It's not about what you actually write, it's about what you have the freedom to do so or not. And really that is so vitally important. It has to be true, the freedom thing.
Another question, G, you mentioned earlier on native advertising, which I think in the context of press freedom is because some people think that a lot of publications are going, it gets a good press, it gets a bad press. There's a John Oliver skit, I'm not sure if you're sure, the US was absolutely hammered native advertising in terms of giving advertisers too much freedom, hoodwinking readers into thinking it's a genuine editorial piece, but in fact it's basically an ad. Just wondered what you thought, Seraphine, about native advertising. Is something that you guys are interested in, or do you feel that perhaps readers aren't being, it's hoodwinking of their readers?
Well, I have a very specific view on this subject matter. I don't believe in it. I think, paying for an environment where you can go in and inject a point of view that is not really wanted or relevant to the audience is just rubbish. Okay? So putting an ad in an environment that advertises a message or commercial message that doesn't add value to the readers is just should not be done. Where it will add value is you're contributing in a way that the editor or whatever is the party involved feel that the company or the bank or an entity has a content attribute. And that is not so-called marketing, it's about brand journalism. And the moment you do that, you should not brand yourself because you value it anyway. So say if you put an economist or strategist or an analyst to have a point of view, you should not brand it and own it, and only your voice is there just because you pay for it. It should be an unbiased, open conversation. You can interview HSBC, you can interview one person from UBS and an industry leader and have a general point of view. Now, having said that, isn't it a normal way of doing editorial instead of like pay? So I net out with the notion that nobody should pay for these things. Make your comms department work harder.
Angela, over to you. I've heard you speak at a conference where you were quite anti-native advertising. It wasn't for the FT, I remember you saying. Yeah. Whereas interestingly, the Economist, which is part of the same group, is very pro-native advertising. It seems to be quite a personal thing according to whoever's running that business. Has your view changed at all on native ads? Are you coming around to the idea that they work?
They don't work for us, so no, we don't offer that within our suite of product. We have other things that we sell people that are, you're talking about environment, we have a product called Smart Match so that you can drop your ads into an environment online that is interesting for you. So for example, let's say it's UBS, I'm selling this right now. say your bond issuance business is, that's what you're pushing, you're really focused on now, or RMB trading desk or whatever. And then we've got a feature on that. We have a way of dropping that ad in a set space next to that story. But it's an ad. It's not another piece of editorial. So you can be aligned with the information you're interested in, but it's still an act. We're not going to pretend that it's anything but. I mean, we've had, as long as I've worked at the EFT, we've always had things called advertorials. So they're labelled advertorial and they're not allowed to look exactly like a paper. They're going to have a different environment, format, etc. But they are chunks of content with illustrations. But they're clearly labelled advertisement or advertorial. But no, we haven't changed on that. We just bang the drum a second. We had record profits last year, 2014 at the EFT, and that was because ads did a stonking great job, as well as our circulation business, and you know, sticking to that line hasn't hurt us commercially, and I think we'll stick with it.
So native advertising, does it spell the end of independent journalism? Does it depress you that there's so many publications, respectable publications that now got native ads where there's a little distinction between editorial and advertising? Does that concern you as a journalist?
It takes the, you know, what Angela was talking about, editorials, you know, a step further. We run editorials in Time magazine, and as of this moment, they still are sort of contained, if you like, in their own format, in their own layout. I do read all the editorials that run in my region beforehand, before they run, for all the reasons that you think. You know, is there going to be a clash on a story that is coming up, maybe in the same edition?
Read off spelling, actually.
Yes, that too. I've often tossed editorials back to the publishing department because of that, because of bad English. Which, look, it's contained, but it doesn't make the advertising look good. You know, I think you can spend a little bit more on quality. But yeah, also for political, for legal, and for claims that instinctively, to me, my gut tells me are outlandish and untrue. Obviously, an advertiser wants to promote itself, but not to the point that we are publishing lies, because then that affects our editorial reputation. Now, native advertising takes it further, particularly on websites when you cannot tell if the story, if the content is an ad or is actually a story. It's difficult. A lot of people are doing it, and this points to something a challenge that I think the big established brands like FT and Time and others are facing, and that is that we're in this juncture where it's a moving target. We have the legacy for Time. We have the legacy of 90 years of evolution into the kind of outfit that we have now. But at the same time, we have the challenges on the digital side, and we have our own digital operation and video and so on and so forth, where the audience is different, where the challenges of producing something quicker, you have less time to look at it. Sometimes you prepare well. I was landing on Monday morning at around 6 a.m. in Hong Kong from Delhi. And when I landed, while we were taxiing to the gate, I was checking email, and just within that earlier 10 minutes, the news had broken that the government announced that Lee Kuan Yew had died. And so we hadn't taken over the handoff from New York. New York was still on the handoff because it's about 6 p.m. Sunday in New York. So the team took it over. We had everything prepared, so we just pressed a few buttons. So what went out wasn't a crash job. But at the same time, I can tell you, 2 days later, we're going to publish a version in the magazine, both on mine, written by me. But the magazine version, I'm still kind of working on it. For later on, when I leave this place and go to the office, I'm still going to tinker with it. But what is out there is already out there. So there are all these new challenges that we're still trying to adjust to, and we're still working on the answers. And frankly, you never come to a point where you say, God, you understand. I think that applies to native advertising too.
Yes, an interesting point you bring up about the potential difference in terms of press freedom with what is published online and in print. I just wonder whether you see there's a difference. Some publications, like South China Morning Post being one, the nature of the publication seems to change in print and online. I just wondered, in your personal perspective, in Tom's perspective, is there a difference and should there be a difference?
Well, one thing that I mentioned already is speed. You've got to respond much quicker. If I'm not mistaken, with the Lee Kuan Yew thing, we were the first out. Within 10 minutes we had a 6-item package out. Pictures, quotes, 3,000 word obituary, so on and so forth, because we had prepped. We had prepped. So speed is a factor, and when you do things faster, the chances of you getting it wrong are greater than when you take time on it. That's one thing. The other thing is the audience is different. Our audience for print and for online, there is overlap, but there are major differences. The third thing is that the demand for content online is so great, it's such a 24/7 thing, that we have expanded our offerings. So the offerings that we have online are far greater than what we have within the magazine. The magazine is very much, a very finite thing. It's so many pages, often the pages depending on the amount of advertising that you have, there's a correlation, and so on and so forth. So yes, but to me, I think the key thing is that the audience is different. We've got a younger audience, we've got a much more audience, much more plugged into social media, and so our offerings are different. So we will do, what are the implications of the battle for Tikrit between the ISIS forces and a Shia-backed, a Shia militia backed by the Sunni government in Baghdad. But we're also going to do National Puppy Day in the United States. In fact, that probably gets more hits.
Angela, your perspective on the difference between print and online in terms of, in the context of press freedom and how the FT behaves as a publication?
I don't think there's any difference in terms of the freedom. I mean, you might put more into the online because I think technically it's infinite, but I don't think it's not more free. It's just more information, more of the same free information. By free, I mean you've got to pay for it. I'm not saying it's free. I mean free in terms of the concepts. But for me, I still like a newspaper every day to look at it because it's a snapshot in time of what these highly trained editors think is the most important stuff of the day, the most important news, the most important interpretation. So I like to look at it because it's a beautifully curated, lovely thing. And while Monday to Friday I tend to go online and just sort of graze through the newspaper, on the weekend I don't like reading our weekend paper online at all, only if I'm somewhere where I can't buy the paper. I prefer to have a lean back experience, go through it, read about Gothic architecture and enjoy myself. So for us, our audiences change their pattern of reading depending on where they are and what time of the week it is. But the paper is like a little moment in time, crystallised, I think, every day. But of course, the rest of the news operation goes on around it 24/7. Yeah, 24/7.
And so, as an advertiser, print or online being obviously a very different beast, editorial publications take a different stance often online. And obviously you're left to the vagaries of comment threads in these stories which can take an unpredictable turn. So as UBS as an advertiser, print or online, what do you feel more comfortable with?
They serve different purposes. So obviously the trends, the industry trend will confirm that digital is everything going forward, but I think print has its own place. For me, digital first, it has to be a strategy. And when we currently spend about 75 to 80% of our entire investment using digital, particularly on mobile, for all the reasons that all these audience obviously know. There is always on, the news are adding on. It's not like you're moving on to print and the next 7-10 hours it cannot change, right up to the paper in your hand. And I think the news teams, depending on which channel you're talking about, it's CNN, Bloomberg, CNBC, FT, and Wall Street Journal, those things you've got to trust that there are news coming in, right? And you only can consume that if you're online, and particularly if you're on the road, mobile. The other thing I really like about online is the agency here, if anybody would know, is about the trackability and the ability to change your buy if something that you prefer, not that something gone wrong, but something that you prefer like more now than a week ago when you made a decision about this in a certain way. As an advertiser, the whole notion of trying to prove your return on investment is huge, and digital can reasonably help that process, not all the way through the conversion and consumer journey. At least you can actually track it quite diligently.
At this point, so for about 25 minutes left, I want to open it up to the floor to ask if anyone's got any questions for our panelists on the issue of commercial value of press freedom. Has anyone got a question? John Mike? Question at the back there.
Thank you. I'm Laura Lewis from the Economist Group. I'd like to ask the panelists their views on China. Beijing has made it very clear that they're not a huge fan of press freedom as we know it. So how do we make money there?
Angela, do you want to take that? Because I was going to ask you later on about setting up foreign-owned Chinese language news sites in China. So
Well, the funny thing about China, and forgive my staff have heard me say this before, to me the big question in my business is why can I make a good, decent profit honestly in the world's biggest communist country, whereas in the world's biggest democracy I'm kind of struggling because it is so immensely difficult to do anything without obstruction in India. But in China, it's not easy, but we have a profitable business there in Chinese, and we also have clients there who buy our advertising in print and online at our conferences outside China. So it's what was difficult about setting up FT Chinese was trying to make people understand that content didn't come with the investment in the advertising. And so there was lots of money, and we lost money for the first 3 years, I think, 3 or 4 years, because people just go, well, we're not going to give you any money, so that's your choice, right? So, and also you're too expensive anyway, and you don't give us the content we want. So it took a long time to educate people, keep knocking on the doors saying, this is the way we do it, this is a great environment, showing testimonials, case studies. I mean, it's a thankless task, but we turned the corner about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, and became a profitable organisation because I think maybe they just got fed up and just started giving us money because we kept on knocking on the door. But they kind of get it, that this is this particular environment. I'm not quite sure they understand it, but they figure that it works for them, so they will invest some money there despite the fact it's not like other things. But it's constantly a problem. I mean, some of our competitors have been blocked for some time. I suppose we have a first mover advantage because we were blocked a lot at the beginning, completely. And now we have individual stories blocked that they don't like, but we just publish and see what happens. But we haven't, and I should be touching a lot of wood here, we haven't been thoroughly and comprehensively blocked for a prolonged period of time, for several years. But that's not to say that we're untouched. There are individual stories that certainly spark the interest of the various competing internet police within China. And sometimes you could be blocked in Chengdu, but you could be available in Shenzhen. It's not consistent because all of it's run on a provincial and then a city basis. It's a mystery, but we kind of blindly stumble around in the dark and still manage to make a bit of money.
And so, sorry, Sarah, do you want to take it on?
I'll just add a little bit. I think it's a very interesting question, and there are many ways to look at this, and answers to that. The Chinese audience will always look for foreign press publications to actually provide so-called unbiased point of view, and hopefully continue to do so. The blocking and all the freedom, we all know, what's going on here. Can't change that because it's, that's a system. So the best way is to sort of find the way that can work with them. If you sort of think of the local publications like Caixin and Caijing, they are actually very provocative. They disclose a lot of things, but they found a way not to annoy and offend and cross that line that they will be, suddenly just back out. How they have done it has a lot of learning. Of course, they are very prestigious, privileged because they have editorial relationship and they would know when not to cross the line and the blackout happens. I think there's some learning in that. The other way to look at it is like, how do you make money? Now, by selling the China story overseas. I mean, even on corporations and companies, how many companies are making money in China? People are making money outside of China by telling the Chinese stories, Chinese investors, for example. Maybe less of that than a couple of years ago, but you sort of look at the mirror effect of it. Right? The more it is controlling and trying to close things down, overseas people are dying to know more what's happening. Right? And I think some of the bureaus are not closed, despite domestically they're not selling anything there, largely not allowed to. Why is it still there? It's exactly not a function of the borders, the mirror.
So do you want to take that China question on in terms of time and the reach you enjoy there and perhaps any potential obstacles?
So I want to say I agree with Angela.
Well, don't disagree with me.
India gives me more trouble than China does. I mean, people think India is free and democracy. You don't know where you stand. And the goalposts are constantly moving, I understand, especially now, the situation in India with this new government. In China, it was a case in China as well, in mainland China, but now we have a much greater understanding of what upsets them and what does not. It doesn't change the coverage that I do, but they also have a much better understanding of why we do what we do. I have seen situations before. Let me give you an example. Some years ago, I wrote a column about China-Taiwan relations, and the peg, it was just the first paragraph, it was the Dalai Lama's visit to Taiwan when Typhoon Morakot had hit Taiwan, devastated. It was Manju's first term. The Dalai Lama was invited by the opposition in Taiwan, very mischievous of them, invited the Dalai Lama to give comfort. And it was nobody, the government couldn't say no, although they knew that this would upset Beijing. So I wrote a column, but it was about China-Taiwan relations looking ahead, but I saw the Dalai Lama. And I just assumed that the column would be torn out or blacked out or whatever on the mainland, because we actually ran a news photograph of the Dalai Lama in Taiwan, comforting people affected by the typhoon. Well, you know what? It sailed through. There were no problems. It wasn't even a case of Chengdu or Shenzhen. And again, Angela's absolutely right. Certain markets like Shenzhen, Shanghai seem to be more liberal. The census seems to be more liberal in distribution than, let's say, Beijing. Recently, I put Xi Jinping on the cover with the title Emperor Xi, and it went through in certain markets in China, and was even on display in Urumqi, in the high sensitive area of Xinjiang. Because I think Xi Jinping liked the fact that he was called an emperor. But again, I was fully expecting it to be prescribed. But with the Dalai Lama thing, was the first time I realized that they actually reading the pieces. Because before they just look at the picture, let's say I've done a column blasting the Dalai Lama and having a picture. Doesn't matter. You got the picture there, we're blocking this, okay? But now you actually read the damn thing, and it was about China-Taiwan relations moving forward, okay? It wasn't pro-Beijing. In fact, if anything, it was pro-Taiwan, but they finally made sense. So that's the first time I realized, and since then, that's what we've been, they will actually say, well, these sentences in this paragraph, we want you to black out. If you don't black out, you're not going to be able to distribute. So then you make a decision. You want a few sentences blacked out and get it out, or you want to, say no on principle, we're not going to distribute. Chances are, most of the time we go with the first option, obviously. But it tells me that they become much more nuanced about it. In India, they're just silly. The Economist has this problem. We have this problem. The map.
On the website, like Google
The map. So both The Economist and Time and other publications go with the internationally recognized maps of India, okay? Where you put a dotted line around between Azad Kashmir and Jammu and Kashmir, and a dotted line around Aksai Chin, which the Chinese claim, and we put Arunachal Pradesh on the northeastern side as part of India. The Chinese don't like that, but the Chinese don't get upset about the maps. The Economist has done this before. We have done it, we don't do it anymore. We actually put a government stamp on it and say, your map is wrong, the map is wrong. Because The Economist at the time would publish a map that is correct, but we are forced to put a label on it saying the map is wrong. And the label does not say, by order of the government of India. It's like The Economist and Time are putting their own label on it. It makes us look pretty stupid. But anyway, exactly. So you make a decision on that point. But I must say this. The FT is domiciled in London. Time's head office is in New York. So Time, I think, has a God-given right to distribute in the United States and should not be. It is a U.S. registered organization. The FT, The Economist in the UK. I think everywhere else, we are guests. We don't have a blanket right to distribute, to tell the Chinese, or tell the Indians, or tell the Indonesians, or tell the South Africans, or Singaporeans, yes, and say that we have a right to come in and sell our product. If they don't like it, I think that they should be open. I think it's short-sighted for them to block. But it's their country, it's their people, it's their laws. Many years ago, Ted Turner, when he was still at Turner, which was part of Time Warner, and Time Inc. was part of Time Warner, Ted Turner visited China with Jane Fonda. And because it's Ted Turner and Jane Fonda, but probably more because of Jane Fonda, they actually got a dinner with Jiang Zemin, who was the president at that time. And then Ted and Jane came to Hong Kong and had a very intimate breakfast in Hong Kong with Time Warner people in Hong Kong and from the region. Very intimate. 300 people in the ballroom of the Grand Hyatt. Okay? And Jane was at the door shaking hands with everybody. She was very, very sporty about it, so I shook her hand. And this question that you have asked was put to Ted Turner. Ted Turner was on stage, and he and his very folksy, cowboy, southern type, drawl, said something much more articulate than I've said. But he made this point that, look, CNN, Turner products are blocked in China. We don't like it. But I'm not going to dictate to the Chinese. And he said, I hope there'll come a time when they will come around to our point of view and they will see that more openness, more transparency, more information, which is what the people of China want, is not a threat to the nation's well-being.
Any more questions from the audience? Okay, we're running a little bit short on time, about 10 minutes left. Another topic I want to bring up is the sort of journalism that's under pressure these days in the context of press freedom, which I think is the sort of programming investigative stuff that exposes, makes people want things, that takes governments and companies to account. I just wondered in your context, and Sylvia and Angela, and I'll come on to you as well, Serafina, what sort of journalism do you feel is most under pressure in the context of press freedom and commercial pressure? Is it that probing sort of journalism that people need?
Not particularly. We don't have a huge team that specifically does investigative journalism. We have people who get assigned a story if they think the story's got some real legs. We used to have an investigative journalism team about 10 years ago, but then they just put them into a more general news pool. And as I say, just assign them necessary. So we tend to go for stories that highlight financial shenanigans. And of course that obviously involves political shenanigans. And then of course, sometimes the stories that we do just involve number crunching, like we attacked, one of our economists attacked Thomas Piketty's book, Capitalism, and said that all his numbers were wrong. And it was just one of those fantastically esoteric arguments where two economists clashing over decimal points. So it was shocking to that community. But it got us a lot of bad press as well as a lot of interesting press. And then in the end, it won, the book won the FT Business Book of the Year award anyway. So, I don't know. So it's, investigative journalism is alive and well at the FT, but it strains our resources. It's got to be a good story to get the resources behind it.
Yeah. So what's your experience on that?
I would classify it more as long-form journalism rather than maybe investigative, not least because Time is, throughout its long history, has actually really not been known for sort of breakings, scoops, if you like. It's much more, let's say our interpretation of the news, of current affairs, our framing of let's say a story with many strands to it to enable our readers to understand what's going on and why it is important is much more the case. So it's less of a concern, let's say to me, and I think to my colleagues as well. Obviously, if we have a scoop, and we just recently had a U.S. political scoop that we broke online, but it's not necessarily something that we would put in the magazine because it was what I call a one-note story, because it was not something that would warrant 3,000 words. It was like a 500-word scoop, and it got some attention, and that's great. But I think to me, Time was is known for its long form, long pieces, long cover stories, and stuff like that. Our cover stories have become shorter. Like a 6-page cover story, before it was like 12 pages. 6-page cover story is much more the norm now. Why? Because I think the pressure to be much more concise, because we're all consuming a lot more, and we all want that consumption to be bite-sized. Yes, the FT weekend, I also take it home, on the weekends to read, but that's a luxury that we don't have, particularly during most of the time. So I think the pressure on time, the pressure to consume so much more, and the pressure to consume it quickly, and the propensity of readers now to actually want that more and more. I think for a lot of us who are reading long pieces, we ourselves have changed our habits. Resources are tougher. We make a decision to choose what stories that we will get into. Our stories are planned 3 months in advance, so we already have our features lined up for the coming weeks, and none of them have to do with the news. It's just how both the media and media consumers are changing in their habits now. You do a 20,000-word piece, and it may be the most wonderful piece of journalism in history, but if no one's going to read it, it's a waste.
So, Serafina, one question for you. platform that is resource heavy that these guys have been talking about, should advertisers pay a premium for that, do you think? Or are eyeballs buying eyeballs? Do you think that there should be more, a bigger price tag on probing journalism?
Yeah, be very careful to answer that because the prices could go up tomorrow.
I think the answer has to be yes. Analytical, long form or time that you spend in a lot of research backs, kind of content is always valued, right? Because that actually is important in the finance and banking world. Right? So if you sort of rephrase that question, it's like that some banks would give tips, investment tips, versus research-backed advisory. Now, which one will take you in a better place in the longer term? I think the answer is very obvious. Back to the sort of journalistic environment, obviously you need both. Sometimes you need very fast news, right? And a lot of the audience are actually becoming contributing editorial as well. In bloggers and in that space, everybody has an opinion. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about actually evidence and, really having specialists who have investigated on a subject matter that has demonstrated some values in the longer term, whether it is about, where to invest, about political situation. You could follow the history of that subject matter for a long time. You don't suddenly talk about Ukraine today. You talk about what happened in history. Right? I think, I'm not special in this area, but if we talk about long form, it's not the length of it. It's analytics that has gone, at the background. Right? If people are just looking for news, they perhaps shouldn't be going into this environment that we're talking about. Therefore, going back to the advertiser's point of view, if our audience, so my customers, my prospects, are just very superficial, they're looking for news, they can go to appledaily.com.
That's all the time we've got for. Unless any other questions, thanks very much to our panelists over here, Angela and Sarah.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. Serafina, Angela, Hare, Robin, thank you. We're going to present just a little memento of the occasion here. As you mentioned, SOPA stands for free press. And I hope that when you look at this, you'll remember your time here with us today. I'd just like to remind everybody, Jimmy Lai's name came up, and he's going to be featured at the June 10th SOPA Awards dinner. Jimmy Lai will be there. We'll be interviewed in a one-on-one discussion with Hugo Restall, who is the op-ed page editor of the Wall Street Journal. It should be a fascinating discussion and worth coming just to hear that on. So we hope to see you on June 10th, Wednesday, June 10th at the SOPA Awards. Thank you all for coming. We're great.